All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. It is a wonderful Tuesday. The best Tuesdays are the ones where we get to interact with our customers. That's what really gets us up in the morning. It's such an incredible opportunity to meet you all and chat with you all and get your questions and ask you questions. So thank you so much for joining. This is going to be an exciting session. We're going to be chatting all things app control. We're going to dive deep into a couple of very interesting recent releases that you should know about. We'll try to keep it high level enough for those who are just interested in app control and maybe don't already have it deployed in your environments. And we will also keep it engaging enough for those who have it and may have a lot of questions about how to best use it, what these new features are, why you should care, all that kind of stuff. So we got an awesome team here. We got a lot of engaging presenters here, and we're super, super excited to chat with you all. One thing I do want to note before I hand it over to Isaiah Brown is this is meant to be engaging, and you're all already engaging a ton in the chat, so I have no worries today. But ask your questions. I could take you off mute whenever you'd like. If you have a longer question and don't feel like typing it out because your fingers are tired, don't worry. Just say, hey, can you take me off mute? Do it in a second. So yeah, we're going to be asking questions. We're going to be engaging with you all. And we hope to have an awesome conversation, an awesome session with you. So thank you for joining. Really, really appreciate you. Without further ado, I will hand it over to my good friend, Isaiah Brown.
All right. Thank you so much, Roy. I'll turn my camera on. Cool. Thank you so much, Roy. Yeah, as I said before, I'm Isaiah Brown, product manager on the App Control product line. I'm also joined by Matt Freak as well, who is the engineering manager for the server team. And so we'll have a great demo and presentation to show later in the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so this is just a quick disclaimer. Later in the presentation, I will be talking about some stuff that's further out on the roadmap, and I just have to give this this little blurb here saying, like, I will maybe potentially share some timelines, but we can't promise to deliver on those timelines, and things may change due to business priorities and other things of that nature. All right, so here is the agenda for today. I just want to reiterate, as Roy said, this presentation is about all things app control, specifically around the app control server. And we know there may be longtime customers on this call that are maybe experts in the products, and we understand there might be some people that are not too familiar with it, or they just heard about it. So my goal here is to keep things like as high level as possible. So I will be doing that with one of our recent releases. That's the 8.10 server, which will be capturing some highlights of what came out. And then Matt will be doing a live demo of the product, of the new features as well. That should be really helpful for some of you that may have not seen the product before, and then also help those of you who are experts and maybe just haven't played around with some of these new features as well. I'll talk about some things that are further out on the roadmap. We will have a dedicated time for QA. However, the caveat is that may depend on how many questions you have during the presentation. And then last, Roy will come in and do some things. We'll thank you all, and we'll do some next steps. So let's go ahead and dive into the first slide. One of the biggest highlights of the 8.10 server is the updated UI. Our goal here was to improve the overall look and feel of the console, and make it look a little bit more modern. So that first started with an updated design. We refreshed it with all new colors, icons, and fonts. Our great UX team partnered with us to get this done. Secondly, we made the console more responsive. The console now will adapt to fit native browser resolutions in all parts. It'll adapt to fit native browser resolutions better. And so, if you're minimizing and maximizing your browser window, there's problems in the past where part of the console would get blocked out because, it wasn't as responsive as it should have been. But now that's no longer the case. We have a lot of us who, might be multitasking, doing different things, and maybe we want to have the server in one small window and then something else in another small window. So now you can do that. And then a large chunk of work from our team went into improving the accessibility. So screen reader support and keyboard only navigation has been updated. We think it's important to support our customers who may have disabilities, and that's why we invested so much time into that. And then the last key point is I want to make sure everyone knows that you do not need to be worried about relearning the console, as a lot of these changes are cosmetic in nature. Everything really remains where it once was, so you don't have to go read a guidebook or study the user guide to figure out what's new. Everything is very, very similar to the way it was, just a different look. That's all. Moving on. We have vulnerability detection. This is a huge new feature in 8.10 server. Basically, it allows customers to detect vulnerabilities that they may have in their environment. And so if you're familiar with the product, some of you may know that we added the ability to detect CPE information about files in your server. And CPEs are a way that you can identify different types of hardware or software. In this particular case, we're only identifying software. And we allowed customers to export that CPE information to obtain CVE vulnerability information in another third-party applications. And we thought, we could take this further. Since the mapping for CPEs was basically already in place, we took it a step further and we decided to send the match CPE data to the National Vulnerability Database to provide back vulnerability scores for software that we've identified CPEs with. So this simplifies the process for users who are who needed to export that data. And also it opens up a whole new functionality bit for customers who want to do vulnerability detection right in the console. So in my screenshot here, as you can see, CVE IDs and the CVSS v3 scores are all provided. For a given CVE ID, you can see the associated CPE, which identifies the vulnerable software. And what's neat about that is I didn't show a screenshot of the CPE applications page, but if you go over to the CPE applications page, you can see all the applications that have matched CPEs, and then you can see the number of CVEs or vulnerabilities identified with that one particular application. I wish I had a screenshot to show you that, but that's a really neat part about this. And then, once you've identified the vulnerable software, you can find the specific endpoints with the affected software as well. Now, note this is only available on Windows only. So for our customers who want to use this on the other platforms, you'll have to wait and see if we'll end up doing that in the future. And then lastly, you can set up and receive custom alerts about the new critical vulnerabilities in your environment. So basically what happens is you'll get an event alert that, hey, a critical a critical vulnerability has been identified, and you can follow up on that and figure out what it is, figure out the endpoints, and remediate it. So the idea behind this, again, really is just, we found more and more customers like to use the server to do asset management. And this feature really increases the product value in that regard. So we're super excited about it. Next up, we have, this isn't actually something in the server, but it's a well-known piece of documentation associated with the App Control Server, and that is our OER, Operating Environment Requirements Guide. This guide has been updated with new guidance for deploying the App Control Server on three well-known third-party cloud platforms. That is Azure, AWS, GCP, or Google Cloud. We've gotten lots of requests and noticed more and more customers are, more and more customers do not want to pay for the infrastructure required to host app control servers, and they want to outsource. They want to look at different options. Historically, it was recorded that we could only support about 5K agents. I mean, I heard customers just saying like, well, I see that you can only support 5K agents. And so we basically, that now is no longer the truth. We built a testing framework to discover the product's capability to support cloud deployments, and we tested. So now we see it's possible to deploy deploy up to 130K agents with a server that's deployed on AWS, 120K for Azure, 100K on Google Cloud, and this enables customers of all different sizes to have an alternative to on-prem hosting of their servers. And then for those customers who still prefer to privately host their cloud infrastructure, we supplied some guidance for bare metal deployments, as well as vSphere, which is a VMware product. All of it can be found in the new 8.10 OER. So moving over here to some of the smaller pieces of some of the smaller features of the 8.10 release, but they're still big wins. This is something I love. Users can now approve the countersigned certificates within the 8.10 console. The inability to approve these countersigned certificates was a major pain point for customers who were experiencing blocks on files with approved publishers. The workaround to the inability to approve these certificates is very tedious and requires users to find missing intermediate certificates directly on the endpoint. I don't think anybody wants to do that. That's not fun. That takes up a ton of time. It's a cat and mouse game, and customers may not know how to go about doing this, so they end up contacting support. And then it turns into support's problem, and and it's kind of like, yeah, it's we've seen an increase. Before this feature, we've seen increased reports of this issue. This new feature helps stop this dance, and gives customers a way to fix this issue simply. Communication key rotation scheduling. We now provide more visibility and adjustability around the communication key rotation. This is a task that needs to be done. It's like this key enables the server and the agents to communicate, and every once in a while it needs to be renewed. It's kind of like the need to change your password. You need to change it regularly to make sure that it is secure. When this task runs unexpectedly in a disconnected or air-gapped environment, it can result in performance issues due to the agents not being able to communicate properly. We have a lot of customers who like to run an air-gapped environment or maybe disconnected. And we feel customers should have control over this. And so to fix this, users can now see the date and time of previous rotations and for future rotations. And you can now schedule them out, I believe up to about 30 days and, receive alerts 5 days before they occur, keeping you in the loop about this task. And then lastly, we have the ability to support Active Directory managed service accounts. We had a lot of customers ask us about this, and we add this as a more secure alternative to the typical AD user account. Typical AD users accounts require more upkeep by the users, and admins require, the permissions management and manual password changes. So this does not require as much upkeep since the passwords are managed automatically. So really a big help for customers here. So I'm gonna stop here for just 1 second, see if we have any questions, and if not, if there isn't any questions, we'll dive into the demo, but I'll just stop here for about 30 seconds. And remember, you can come off of mute. All you got to do is just ask Roy, and I think he'll take care of that.
I see we got 2 questions in the Q&A. It looks like Matt answered both, but let us know if you have any follow-up questions to those 2 questions in the Q&A. We're happy to address it further.
There are a couple of new questions as well, if anybody has
Nice.
a chance to look at those.
So my understanding for the vulnerability component, we cannot build any dashboards around that at this time. And then for the second question, just give me a second here.
We don't have any new out-of-the-box dashboard portlets for vulnerability components. I can say that.
Yeah.
So on the second question, is, our VMware implementation team said not to use certificate approvals if the goal was working toward a zero trust model. Is that still correct? I don't quite understand why that would be said. Certificates, using a trusted publisher model is a very effective way to get into high enforcement. Yes, you are trusting that the certificate is valid and that it has been, it has not been stolen, for example. But it's a key way to get into high enforcement, and I would highly recommend using it.
Looks like we have another question in the webinar chat. Oh, we got more here.
I will demo how to approve the countersigner certs. I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking or not, Akshay.
Yeah, so let me, I just want to talk about the countersigned certs. So one of the challenges with certificates is the certs have to be, as most of you know, have to be on the endpoint itself. So if a certificate is missing, and sometimes that is the cert for the timestamp, even though the certificate for the file, for the publisher for the file is on the system and it's approved, the file will get blocked. And as Isaiah said, there were some little song and dance you had to do to get to find the certificate and have it approved. Now you can do that within the console. So when that issue does come up, you can approve that intermediate cert. The other option is obviously to make sure that your endpoints have those certs, but that can be a little more problematic. Hope that helps. And Zachary asked if there's a plan to support Intune for doing deployment. So currently we have a SCCM rapid config that when you are deploying new software using SCCM, those files are approved on write to those systems. We do not have an Intune rapid config, but we'll take that feedback and we'll see if we can get one created.
Okay. We'll get some more questions. And Roy, in terms of time, do you think we should move some of these questions to the next segment or to later in the presentation, or should we just
let's keep them for the end? So ideally the last 10 minutes will be open Q&A. So let's make sure we get to these answers if we don't answer them via text right now.
Okay.
Get to these questions. Sorry.
All right. Hey, this is great engagement. Everybody's really
fantastic.
All right. So and now I'm gonna pass it over to Matt, who's going to do a quick demo of 8.10 and some of these new features that I talked about. And so with that, I'll pass it over to you, Matt.
Thank you very much. For that to show up. Okay, here we go. Please feel free to keep asking questions as we go. Either I will try to answer them if I can, or others will be able to answer via chat. Or people can feel free to jump. In any case, I will begin with just a quick overview of the UI. I guess mostly at a high level for customers that aren't familiar with it. But the idea, as Isaiah said, was to try to update the look and feel and the usability and accessibility without fundamentally redesigning and changing around where everything is. So when you first log in, you'll be presented with the dashboard. This is kind of the default view, and it's very customizable. Going from there, across the top, we have our main categories. For example, under reports, accessing events is one of the most common and useful things you'll need to do to be able to see what's going on in your environment. This view presents you with a very, very deep level of back and forth between the, what's going on all of the endpoints being protected. So there's a lot of very flexible ability to filter and create alerts based on event types to really drill down to what's important and relevant in your environment. Moving along, assets allows a view into which computers, which files are being tracked by on all of those computers, installed applications, devices, removal devices, for example, certificates, things like that. Rules is where we get into really the nitty-gritty of what you are going to be protecting on your system. Next, if I go to the software rules page, for example, there are numerous tabs of different types of rules that can be created to try to support the goal of a default deny posture. Everything should be ideally as locked down as possible, and these rules are set up to only allow the things to run that we want to run. The tools allows other important ways to, for example, approval requests of files that were otherwise blocked on endpoints and different managing alerts, things like that. And then the settings gets you really into your deep system configuration and things like that, updating, login permissions, things like that. So the UI, everything is still more or less laid out as it was, but hopefully is just a little nicer and a little more accessible. Moving on, I will jump into the applications section to talk about the CPE applications. So the first thing I want to preface this is, if I look at the application catalog, I have a very small server here. I only have a couple of Windows computers assigned to it, so there's not a lot of data on here, but the application catalog only shows 30 applications installed. If I jump to the file catalog, then you'll see that I have thousands, 7,000 items. So file information, individual file information is a much easier and better way for us to track what's actually on a system. The application catalog is dependent on being reported by the operating system as to which handful of applications are installed, but the file catalog gives us a much deeper look into that. So for our CPE applications, we are matching what's in the CPE dictionary, and this applies to CVEs as well, against the file catalog. So you may find things in here that do not show up in the applications catalog, for example, and that is because we're trying to go as deep as possible as to what we're looking for. All the data for CPEs and CVEs is coming from the US government's NIST, and they have a publicly available API for that data. They also optionally allow you to request an API key to get slightly faster and more reliable, basically access to that API. We are able to work with or without it fairly equally as well. But it is an option to put that in there if you are having any issues there. We've tried to update this kind of access to where this UI is and the look and feel of how the progress of doing the syncing and matching takes, because it is a very large set of data that does take quite a while to bring into the app control server, at least the initial load. After that, the updates, which, for example, as I have said here, are running at 3 a.m. every day automatically, those will be nice quick updates because they're not usually too large. But diving into the data then, we released the CPE applications feature initially a few releases ago, but we have enhanced it quite a bit with 8.10 and with the addition of the CVEs. So I'll get into that a little bit. On this system, for example, if I scroll over, we're now able to see new data about how many CVEs are detected for these versions of the software, what the most dangerous CVEs are, their criticality level, or their score, I suppose. So if I, for example, here filter on the which items in the dictionary are matching to what's installed in my environment, I can see that I have a lot of Internet Explorer, for example, but then also different, different things, and see how many CVEs are present against these. So where I need to then tackle getting things updated. You can click on the CVE information here to go directly to the NIST website and see all of the details. That is also available from the CVE instances page. If you look at the total CVEs column, if I click on that, that will load you to the CVE instances filtered to that specific application, and you can then get further details on them as well here. Going back. Some of the enhancements we have made here are over on the left side, 2 new actions you can take. The magnifying glass is to find instances of this CPE. So for example, if I click the magnifying glass there, this will bring me to the file catalog, and it will filter based on the software and the version that you're looking at. So you can see all of the files that we detected as part of that install. This is why we do it via the file catalog. It's not just one simple Mozilla Firefox executable. It's anything associated with that program that we can detect. And then similarly, the icon next to that, the little computer icon, is find computers with this application. As I mentioned, I have a very small little environment set up, and they both have Firefox installed, but this is the way where you can really get at which of the systems in my environment may be susceptible to this vulnerability, or to any vulnerabilities with that. We also have an alert out of the box based on the critical CVE detected or matched, event. So whenever updates to the dictionary occur, including on the very first download of it all, we will look for any matches on critical level CVEs. The criticality level is determined by the NIST data. And this is a way to alert the administrators that they should go have a look at what is on the CPE applications page and what maybe needs updating on which computers. Just having a look to see if there are any specific questions about that. No. Okay. I'll pause for a minute. Just, are there any specific questions on CPE or CVE information before I move on? CPE and CVE are not enabled by default when you first visit the CPE applications page. If you click on the Configure CPE button, this is where you can set either manual or automatic updates. And then you can also click the Execute Sync and Matching button now to kick the process off. As I said, the initial download will take quite a while because it's a fair bit of data and we have to access their API on a we can't just dump it all immediately. So that's why, having like an overnight automatic update schedule works pretty well. It can happen kind of out of sight, out of mind. The CVE alert is based on events. So if your events are being sent out, then they would get logged that way. The impact on the database, there is additional database storage related to it all, but kind of the ongoing processing of it is pretty lightweight. So it's more of a storage situation than a any kind of performance impact. I don't know if Tim wants to. Oh, I think Tim just marked it as answered. So yeah. And again, it's not enabled by default. So out of the box, when you install it, we will not just suddenly start downloading a large amount of data. I don't know if somebody else can answer the question about external analytics.
Yeah, I don't think so. The external analytics files would be anything that you are sending, right? Any of the files in your environment that you're sending to to a file analysis service. So if the files that this is what the CPE is basically taking this JSON dictionary, and it's a standard naming convention of publisher, title, and version, right? It's not, it's here's a name, right? And then we're doing that mapping of the file catalog. So it's not like we're adding new files into the environment or anything like that. So if you have external analytics going for files in your environment, those would still be sent up. This really isn't, the CPE isn't really related to that. I hope that answers the question. Do we need to take any other questions live, or do we want to answer them in the chat, in the QA?
Yeah, I'll continue on, and obviously, please feel free to keep asking questions, and we'll have more time at the end. CPE and CVE data is exposed via API calls as well, yes. Okay, moving on. I will talk about or show off the workflow for countersigner certs quickly. So I know a specific file that has countersigner cert. So I bring up carbon black ink files, for example, if I find the main carbon black agent installer, or sorry, executable, what we can see here is there's a new field on the file details and exposing the countersigner certificate. So in visiting that, I'm now able to see that this certificate is unapproved. And if this was causing me a problem, by visiting the publisher of this certificate and viewing the certificates from that publisher, I'm now able to select that certificate and approve it and say, yes, I would like to approve it. And with that being approved, if I jump back to my certificate, I can now see that I am approved and all is well. So this was a bit of a contrived scenario because I wasn't having a problem with it, but I at least wanted to be able to demonstrate, now they're exposed and how to approve them. The final thing I will talk about is the communication key rotator. That is a system configuration setting for administrators under the security tab. Communication keys, as Isaiah mentioned, are used by the agents to talk to the server to ensure that we have safe and secure communication going on. And what we've enhanced in 8.10, I believe, is the ability to now see the date the key that's active was generated, and if required, regenerate one immediately with a click of a button. And at the same time, see when the next scheduled rotation will be. Out of the box, it is a 1 year, 365-day schedule. If for some reason this date or time of day does not work, then we now have a simple button to reschedule and choose the date. We've set it up so that you can move it out up to 30 days and no further. And then you can choose the time of day that you want it to run for. The reason we set 30 days was simply that this is a security mechanism that is important, and we didn't want people to be able to just say, "I'll put it off another year" or something. So try to keep it within a contained window and get it done. And that, as Isaiah mentioned as well, there is an event generated 5 days before the next rotation, so that administrators will get a warning that it's going to happen and they can come take an action here if they need to. You can also set up an alert for that event in case you need an extra warning. That is the end of my demo. I see a question about Yara, so let me bring that up, and then if you don't mind, Tim, I'll cede the floor to you.
Sure. Yeah, and of course you asked to see that as I'm starting to eat my lunch. So we added the ability to leverage Yara for end user, for you as customers. So we've had the Yara open source project included in app control since I think 8.0, and what that allows us to do is detect like types of installers that are in your environment. We can see, okay, this is this installer. Okay, we're going to allow this thing to then, if this thing is approved, then all its subsequent files will also be approved. We also use it in our ransomware rapid config. We can detect if something is being encrypted. So Yara is pretty powerful. It allows you to look at the contents of files, and you can drive approvals and bans using that. So in the case, an example I use for driving approvals, developers are typically very hard to get into a high enforcement policy, right? Because they're constantly compiling new executables, DLLs, etc. They don't usually have signing certificates on their systems, right? So they can't sign the files that they compile and then run them. So one way that you could have developers in high enforcement who are constantly compiling new stuff is to look for unique stuff in that file using Yara. So one example we give is you can look in the portable executable header of a file and you can say, okay, this is the original file name. We know this is the original file name that we build in this environment. And you could drive an approval off of that. That's like one possible example. You can also do it to ban files, right? So you could write a rule. You could go to GitHub and find a Yara rule for some particular malware family. Maybe there's a malware family that's like attacking your industry. You could take that Yara rule, put it in and drive a ban off of that. And that, if you're in high enforcement, you don't have to really worry about that too much. But let's say you have some endpoints that are in low enforcement, or you're in the process of moving to high enforcement, you could do that. You could pull in that Yara rule. So Yara is a very powerful tool. Basically, what we do is we created an interface, and actually, Matt, if you hit add Yara rule, you'll be able to see that interface where you can say, okay, give it a name, and then you give it a namespace. And there's two types of namespaces. There's a classification, and then there's is interesting, and there's a description. Is interesting is you want to determine what files to track. So you could say, yep, I want to track. I don't know, like you could actually say I want to track doc files, which but you want to really restrict it because that could be really horrific, the amount of files, right? But you can decide what you want to track or what you want to tag. And then you put in your rule, which is basically a simple C-like language. Actually, if you go back to the list of existing rules, you can kind of see what that scripting language looks like. So there you've got a Yara rule where you're saying, okay, this rule is called virtual protect. And the part that comes after that colon PS underscore virtual protect, that's the tag that we're giving it. If we find a string that says virtual protect, and it's not a portable executable file, go ahead and assign that tag to it. Then you leverage that tag in a custom rule. So you can say, hey, if there's this Yara tag, go ahead and do this particular enforcement, whether you want to approve or ban or whatever. So incredibly powerful. It's relatively new. Yeah, like I think we added it in the 8.9 Windows agent. So like play with it. If you have feedback, we've gotten a lot of good feedback. I think like I'd like to hear more about like the process of creating a rule. So yeah, play around with it and let us know what you think. And then we've got a question, does this support import of Yara sequence tag for matching? So we don't have an import. I've gotten some feedback around that before. That might be a version 2, being able to import like Yara packages. But yeah, nothing at the moment.
All right. With that, the demo is over, and I'll hand it back to Isaiah. Thank you.